has 7 departments that include a lot of the out of classroom experience areas for students to get involved, engaged, and connected. This year, we made it an educational priority in student life to help students get connected. We knew that this would be a very disconnected feeling time, and so we wanted all of our programs and events to focus on connections, helping students become self-aware, personally grow, and become servant leaders so they can positively impact the world. And so we're doing that right now in a lot of different ways. One is these forums. These parent and family forums are a way for us to get connected to you and to also get the information and the resources that we do have available at San Francisco State connected to you so you can help them get connected to your students. We also are trying in student life to make sure that all of our online and virtual portals and platforms are engaging and students are able to access and utilize them as easy as possible. So one example is our Gator Experience. If you're not familiar with that, it is our online engagement portal for student organizations where students can log in and learn about our over 250 student organizations, and they can learn about how to get involved in the organizations. They can learn about when the events and programs are, and there's even a calendar in Gator Experience. So if you ever hear your students say, I'm wondering what I could be doing right now, you know, and maybe when they're not watching Netflix or doing other things, they could always log in to one of the virtual events and programs that our student organizations are hosting. And they can find out about those through our Gator Experience portal. Also, this year, we knew that we were going to have quite a unique summer experience for you all. So a virtual new student programs orientation was something unlike anything else we had done. And so that was when our orientation leaders got to connect with new students over the summer. Usually that's in person, we do small groups, and this year we did our best in a virtual and remote way to still find connections for new students and our orientation leaders. We wanted to continue that into the fall because we knew we were going to be virtual as well, and we wanted that connection, again going back to that, for our new students with their orientation leaders. So now, the fall semester, our orientation leaders are serving as Gator Mentors, where they have a cohort of, a group of students that they try to connect with who are first-year students and try to offer support and resources throughout the entire first semester. They'll go into the spring semester, and many of our first-year students will start taking first-year seminar courses, and they'll have peer mentors there as well. We really value peer mentoring here at San Francisco State, and we've seen the effectiveness and the usefulness of having peer mentors to serve as guides and resources to our new students. Another resource that we launched is You at SF State. It is a virtual wellness and health platform. So you.sfsu.edu is a platform that students can log into, and they can take some self-assessments around their thriving, mattering, and success. And then it'll give them some recommendations for ways that they could focus on those areas. And then there's all of these resources in the U at SF State around health, wellness, their videos, their articles. They're just great ways to learn about health and wellness, set goals. Your students can set goals in there and it will track them. It was really exciting. We have a staff member in our office, Pam Sue, who's our Associate Dean of Students, and she shared that she just achieved one of her goals in the platform last week in a meeting I was in, and we all celebrated that for her. So You at SF State can really be a resource, especially now when it's just mental and emotional and physical and personal wellness are challenged like they've never probably been challenged before for all of us. And so You at SF State is a great resource for that. Our career services and leadership development pivoted very quickly to offer all virtual services, meaning career counseling and coaching, all of their programs. They moved virtually. And then they started a new program just for new students, and that's the Gator Leadership Circle that really focuses on leadership development and skill building for our first-year students. They also launched not that long ago, I think it was a couple years ago, the Gator Connect, which is a way for our students, and they can start now, new students can do this in their first year. They can log into the platform, Gator Connect, and they can get connected to an alumni who maybe is in a field that they're majoring in or they're interested in. Or there is also some industry partners who are on that platform as well. So if your student is looking for a mentor, whether it's the peer mentors that they have through the Gator Mentors, or they're looking for a professional mentor or get connected to our alumni, Gator Connect is a wonderful resource for them. So the last few that I will highlight is in residential life, which I'll speak a little bit later. They've started this year having programming specific positions that focus on connecting with students to check in with them, but also offer innovative programming to reach students during this virtual time. And our student organizations are still continuing to have Lunch with Leaders, their monthly student organization roundtables, where they talk about different aspects of running and managing a student organization, as well as the challenges and the leadership that comes from serving in a leadership capacity in a student organization. And then we also have continued our Gator Think Tank, which is our student life advisory group of a diverse group of students who provide feedback on the student experience. So all of those things really, I think, connect well with what we're trying to do with getting students connected during this disconnected time. So we're trying to do that as much as possible. As you saw in some of the beginning slides, as you were waiting, the Dean on Call program, which is in the Dean of Students office, is another way that we help students get connected to resources. And I'll share a little bit more about that later in the program. But we just are trying our best to have as many opportunities for resources and connections for students this year. So that's student life. I open arms and so appreciate all of our parents and families, the many things that you do to also support and get our students connected to all of the resources at the university, including those in student life. So we're going to next, I'm going to go over a little overview of what we have in store for you today. So today's agenda is going to start with President Lynn Mahoney, our president, and she is going to share with us about the academic year and give us some updates. Then we're going to hear from housing and residential life about updates and question and answers that you might have for them as well. And then we'll end with an open family forum. So this is any questions that come up for you or you've just had and you didn't know where to ask them. This is that safe place for you to ask. And we welcome any questions that you have. We'll do our best to be able to answer them. And if we can't, we'll find a way to get back to you so we can make sure you get the information to the questions that you ask. So we have a full agenda. And so now I am going to transition it to our Associate Vice President for University Engagement and Protocol and Interim Associate Vice President for Alumni Relations. How you get all that on a name tag, I have no idea, is Nicole Lang, who is going to join us now.
Thank you, Danny. It is a long title. I don't know what to say. We'll try and narrow that down, but thank you for that wonderful welcome. Good evening, everyone. As Danny mentioned, you can see my title and what I do for the university. But in other great news, I've worked at the university for the last 6 years. I think I have the best job on campus. It's an amazing place to be. And I'm also a very proud alumna of the university. You know, this is our third family forum, and I'm really excited to kick off this one. We're 2 months into the semester, and I hope you can really take a moment to congratulate yourselves and your student. You're doing a wonderful job. And, you know, we are still so, you know, we're sorry that we can't be back on campus and all together again, but please take an opportunity, take a moment and recognize how much you've all accomplished so far. As Danny mentioned, tonight is going to be a wonderful program. We'll be hearing from Dr. Lynn Mahoney and Jenny Patino and David Rorick from housing and residential life, because those are the topics we are hearing again and again is on everyone's mind. I'm going to take a moment, put on my alumni relations hat, and formally and personally invite all of you to join us for our Alumni Hall of Fame celebration. We're gonna hold that this year, first time ever virtually, on Friday, November 6th from 6 to 7 p.m. We are honoring two amazing alumni. First is Netta Nabari. She is a noted businesswoman, humanitarian, and philanthropist, and she is also responsible for establishing the first of its kind Center for Iranian Diaspora Studies right here at San Francisco State. And believe me, I could go on and on about her accomplishments. So you can check those out at the program. The second person we're going to honor is Jonas Rivera. And Jonas is a producer at Pixar Studios, and he's the first US-born Latinx producer to win 2 Oscars. His first was for Inside Out, and his second was just this year for Toy Story 4. So we hope you can attend. We put the link to register. Everyone's free to join us. The link is in the chat, and we'll also send that out in the email that's going to follow up. And another thing that's wonderful that's going on campus right now is we are right in the midst of our campaign for hope. And any gift to the Campaign for Hope supports our Hope Crisis Fund, which offers aid to students struggling to cover basic needs, such as food and shelter. And a small gift can go a long way in this program. And if you're able to make a gift that would support our students, we would genuinely appreciate it. That link is also in the chat. And we will also include that in the follow-up email. So following tonight's forum, you're going to get a survey. We hope in there you'll share other topics or questions, issues that you would like for us to cover. We'll have the links that I mentioned. We are also recording tonight's program, so you'll have the opportunity to watch it again or share it with others who couldn't join us tonight. So we hope you enjoyed tonight's program and find it informative. We thank you for joining us, and as always, go Gators.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and I'm so thankful about what you've highlighted, especially the alumni event, as well as the giving to the Campaign for Hope. The Hope Crisis Fund, which is managed out of the Dean of Students Office, is such a resource for our students who need it in the most emergent times. We meet with students and the needs of our students, especially now in relation to COVID-19 and the pandemic and the impact it's had. Any gifts, it would be wonderful to contribute to that. So thank you, Nicole, and I really appreciate that. Now we're gonna transition next to introducing our Gator mentors, who are Gator mentors and orientation leaders, who I'm going to have introduce themselves, just so you can see the incredible students that we have who are here to help support your student. So I will turn it over first to Grace, it looks like, or hi, Grace.
Hi. I'm Grace Mcguire. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a Gator mentor. I'm a sophomore and I'm studying in psychology, and it's so great to be here with y'all.
Hello everyone, my name is Elena. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Like Grace, I'm also a Gator mentor. I'm currently in 3rd year here at SF State, and I'm an international business major, and really excited to be here too.
Hello, my name is Javon Zamora. You can call me Jovi like Bon Jovi. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm from Fresno, California. I'm a 2nd year, and I'm majoring in theater arts. Nice to see everybody.
Awesome. I think is that everyone? Are we? Yep. So those are our Gator mentors who thanks each of them for their role and their leadership that they provide for our first year students. They're such a great resource, and tonight they're going to help us. There may be some questions that you ask that one of them could better answer than us. So we're so grateful that they are on this call and they can help provide the student perspective on some of the answers you may have. So now it's my pleasure to transition to the next slide and introduce our president, President Lynn Mahoney, who has been here just over a year and has truly hit the ground running with multiple things that have occurred in her first year. And she has done so with steady leadership, compassionate care, and a centeredness on students that I am so grateful as a Dean of Students for. And so President Mahoney is gonna provide for us updates on the university. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you, President Mahoney, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Danny. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you everyone for spending your Sunday afternoon, early evening with us. I think I speak for all of us when I say that a year ago, we never envisioned what today would look like. I certainly had no expectation ever that the world, the country, the university would be doing what we're doing now. As the pandemic spread back in January and February, I think most of us thought it was something that happened somewhere else. And then maybe by February, we started to think, maybe we'll have to cancel some large events. And then by the end of the month, well, maybe we'll have to take a temporary pause in face-to-face instruction. And now, 7 months later, we're still at it. And we'll be at it for the foreseeable future. The pandemic continues to unfold in unexpected ways, and we will continue to meet whatever it throws our way as we move forward. Since the very beginning, San Francisco State and the California State University system have put two things at the center. These have been kind of our North Stars as we navigated the pandemic. And the first, of course, was public health and the health of our students and employees. And then student progress to degree and success. And we've worked as hard as we can for the last 7 months to balance those two things, to keep our focus on those two things. And as you've likely heard, we're going to be continuing with remote instruction at least through the spring semester. These were decisions that were made with heavy hearts. University campuses are not supposed to be empty places. We're not supposed to be doing it this way. Campuses are supposed to be places where students are tripping over one another, where in addition to spectacular experiences in the classroom and in student clubs and organizations, you have ways of connecting with one another. So I don't want to minimize how hard this has been or how bumpy it has been. But what I want to stress is what I have found so inspirational about what I've seen over the last 7 months. And that's our students and our faculty and our staff. We gave our faculty 4 days notice to move their classes remote last spring. And then we were able in May to give them 3 months notice, though, that we would continue for the fall. And over the summer, over 1,300 of our faculty devoted their summer to taking advantage of professional development and opportunities to perfect their virtual teaching. They knew they needed to be better at it, and they spent their summer doing it. And the same is true for our students. They have returned, our continuing students have returned in record numbers, and they're persevering. And again, I don't want to minimize the extent to which this is challenging, and it could be maybe a minor challenge of having to share a bedroom with your sibling, again, even though you expect to be here, or it could be a major challenge of having a family member who's ill or a family member who's lost employment, or you yourself has lost employment. But what I've really has been remarkable is the way that they've persevered. And you saw the 4 Gator student leaders just here, and there are many, many more. And then our staff had to figure out how to do everything they've always done face-to-face remotely. And you heard Dean Danny talk about all of the ways that they've moved new student programs, orientation, leadership development. But we've also moved academic advising, academic support. We've moved everything virtually. And so when I survey the terrain, recognizing how challenging it's been, I just see inspiration all over the place. One of the stories I love to cite the most was last spring, probably sometime around May. I was surfing Facebook, and I saw that one of our students had posted, one of our faculty members had posted a picture of her freshman seminar, and it had been Bring Mom to Class Day. And so she had her screenshot in Facebook was the Zoom squares with her students and their mothers. That would not have happened otherwise. I've also seen innovations in teaching that might not have happened otherwise. And we've also gotten to know each other in ways that weren't possible before. I know a lot more about the pets of my colleagues and even of my students. I know which pets. I think Dean Glassman has one who has occasionally Zoom bombed him and made some unexpected appearances in meetings. And I've also gotten to meet siblings and parents. So lots of, so again, I don't want to minimize the challenges, but the innovation has also been significant. And I think some of it will persist post-pandemic. I think we will make much better use of technology than we did in the past. I think we will see innovations in teaching that we hadn't seen at the level that we're going to see them. And I think that for this generation of students, we're going to see resiliency and commitment and passion and engagement in new levels. So this will end. And despite the challenges, both of remote instruction, I'm sure you've read about the budgetary problems of the California State University and at San Francisco State in particular, we're going to maintain our focus on students, and we're going to maintain our focus on student success. And I just want to give you 4 things that you have to look forward to, or 3 or 4 things. We opened a new residential complex in August. It is absolutely spectacularly gorgeous and very underused at the moment because of the public health guidelines here in San Francisco. But I have every hope that next fall it will be fully filled to capacity. In this spring, even though we won't be face-to-face, we're going to open a new building devoted to the liberal and creative arts. It's going to have state-of-the-art media facilities, broadcast facilities. It's going to be spectacular. So when our students come back in the fall, they come back to a really beautiful new building. And then I'm really happy to announce that the California State University system has decided among all of the projects that it's had to cancel most of its capital projects, building projects for next year. But of all of the ones that they could have chosen, I am deeply grateful that they have chosen to use their one-time capital dollars to help us build a new science building. Our new science building is in desperate need of transformation to make it a hands-on, interactive, state-of-the-art lab and learning experience for our students. In addition, over the last few years, we've hired dozens of new faculty, including over 30 who started this fall. Just like our new students, we have new faculty who have never taught on campus, and they're doing this virtually. So we'll be welcoming them in person next fall. And then again, our staff, you've heard Dean Glassman. In a little while, you'll hear from Jenny and David. Our staff are unlike any other, and you just got to meet Nicole. And one of the things that distinguishes many of them is the number who are alumni. So I think we will be back face-to-face. This will end, and we have a lot to look forward to. So Danny, with that, I'll turn this back to you to facilitate some Q&A.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, President Mahoney. And I'm glad that you mentioned, I do have a pet at home. His name is Cooper. And he did have a really funny moment in one meeting that I had with you, and you got to see my green screen tumble as he thought it was his sleeping place. So thanks for reminding me of that funny story. I was so embarrassed in the moment. So we're going to take some questions. I'm noticing we have one in the chat. I believe we can have that question answered. It's about housing for student athletes in the spring. We can do that during the housing and residential life updates. A question we had for you, President Mahoney, as we also are still receiving more questions, is you are talking to families and student supporters. You yourself are a student supporter. And so we wondered if you could share a little bit how you navigated like any advice you would have to parents and families about making mistakes during higher learning experiences, given you have personal experience with that, as well as many years of experience working in higher ed. So any advice you would give for when students make mistakes and how they leverage that as a learning experience?
Thanks, Danny. Danny knows this, as do some of the others. I started my career as a professor of history, actually living with undergraduates. For 14 years, my husband and I lived in an apartment complex with 380 undergraduates. We were faculty fellows. We raised our children there. And I absolutely love living with students. And what it taught me as a professor was to really view the student experience holistically and how many people were out there to help. So a couple of things I would say is just, we all make mistakes. We all make mistakes, and new students may make them a little more frequently than others. And now our new students and even our continuing students are doing this under unimaginable circumstances. So first thing is know that every mistake can be recovered from, right? This is one blip in a long career. So with that, being forgiving, and I would say that in general during COVID, the recommendation I give to most people is we've got to keep forgiving ourselves. This is really hard. All we can do is the best that we can, and then congratulate ourselves for having done the best that we can. But the thing I would really urge is the only time a mistake becomes a problem is when the mistake becomes compounded with multiple mistakes and the student hasn't reached out for help. So we have so many people ready and waiting to help. Our academic advising units, our Dean on Call, our student life, our counseling and psychological services, our health services, those are still fully staffed and operational. They're just remote. So please urge your student to reach out for help. That's the best thing you can do. And know that there's almost no mistake that can't be fixed.
Thank you. And that is some really good advice and a reminder to all of us that, doing the best we can, especially during these times. And I think something else you've said before is right now, good enough is enough. Because we're all focused on a lot right now, both personally and in our education and for our students, all the things that they're doing. So we did have a question in the chat, President Mahoney, about the science building and the timeline for when we think that might actually open.
We're thinking 2024. So this fall, the rest of the fall and early winter, we'll move the faculty that are in that building, even though no one's in the building. People have their offices and their labs. We'll move those things out. We will start demolition, I guess, next year. And so we should open in the fall of 2024. That building should be open.
Great. We've had another question come up, and it was around the recent Zoom. I don't know if the question is around if you, President Mahoney, might just share the campus response to the Zoom speaker and the situation that we had there, and just anything you'd like to speak to that.
I'll speak more generally than to that one speaker. Universities and their faculty and their students will invite controversial speakers to campus. Some will be more controversial to others. And in this instance, the speaker was particularly controversial because of her association with terrorism in the 1960s and 70s. So what I will say is this. This is my general approach. I have, as the president of a public university, I am held to the highest standards of academic freedom. And I deeply believe that my faculty and my students need to engage in their learning and in their research and their teaching free from censorship. But I also recognize two things: that some speakers represent things that need to be publicly condemned, and I was very clear in this instance to condemn terrorism and violence against unarmed civilians. But I also recognize that words wound. And so one controversial speaker who may represent one group of students or faculty may be deeply wounding to another. And so the hard needle that I thread as a university president is to both support the right of my faculty and students to bring those speakers, but then also support the right of my faculty and students to need support when those words wound and to support their right to dissent. This is among the hardest things universities do right now. I think as university president, my other commitment is to viewpoint diversity and making sure over the course of a student's career here that they get to hear multiple perspectives, regardless of how controversial they might be. It's part of the kind of painful part of the learning experience that occurs here.
Yeah, thank you so much, President Mahoney. And I know that is a hard and delicate balance to strike. We had a question about next year, so was very excited to hear about, the hope, I'm gonna call it a hope, for us to, I need some water, for us to have in the fall a return of students at a higher number than we've had this fall. So could you speak to a little bit about what will that look like for to have a high number of students return back in the fall, and how are we planning already or thinking about it as well as we can?
So again, what I've learned in the 7 months, and I believe that this is I'm paraphrasing badly an old Yiddish expression in English: man plans and God laughs. So I will tell you what we're planning, knowing full well that God could be laughing, and this may not be what we end up doing. So right now we're just planning for our remote spring. Again, we want to make sure that we do this as well as we possibly can. But what we're going to start to do is look at what would it look like if we're back 100% next fall? And that would include welcoming second-year students and transfer students who maybe have never been on our campus before. So they're going to need a special welcome. But also, what will happen if, in fact, the public health department says that the residence halls can only be 50% to capacity? So we're going to start contingency planning, scenario planning, and have multiple scenarios so that by the late spring, we're ready with multiple plans, seeing what COVID throws at us. I'm going to tell you right now, though, I am keeping fingers and toes crossed. I keep saying I'm sacrificing tofu goats. Anything that brings us good luck and good karma, that we are vaccinated and back 100% in the fall, but paying careful attention to the students who'll be new even though they've had a year with us. I will say something else, just kind of the things that keep a university president awake. Last spring, May, was our commencement was virtual, and that was heartbreaking for our students and families. We haven't made a decision about this commencement, but if what I'm reading in the San Francisco Chronicle and the New York Times and other things is any indication, it's unlikely we'll be able to have an in-person commencement. So that will be 2 years of graduates who have not had an in-person commencement, and we have promised them that one day we will do it for them. So I've been trying to imagine how we're going, and we have about 8,000 graduates a year, how we're going to celebrate 24,000 graduates in May of 2022. And Nicole Lang, whom you met, does commencement. I probably just gave her a heart attack when I said 24,000 students to celebrate a commencement. But we're trying to plan for all sorts of scenarios, and we'll see what the pandemic throws our way.
Thank you, President Mahoney. And certainly I know that we like to say the new now, and it seems that we're making plans, but always knowing that they could easily have to change depending on the situation and as we continue forward towards the fall. I want to thank you for your time, President Mahoney. We know there's a few other questions, but we're going to try to get to those, everyone, as we can as we move through the program. But President Mahoney, if you'd like to say any final words before we transition.
Yeah, I just want to first thank folks for participating, but also this is the unimaginable. We've never done this. Hopefully we'll never do it again. And I just want to thank you for trusting students. Thank you for attending. Student supporters, thank you for supporting our students. And families, thank you for trusting your students with us. I am an enormous believer in the power of public education to transform students' lives and the lives of their families and the lives of their communities. So there's nothing more important than what we're engaged in now. So thank you. I will end by also just saying, if you always feel free to contact me, Lynn Mahoney at sfsu.edu. I try to answer every email I get myself. So give a holler if I can help. And thank you to all the panelists tonight and to all the attendees.
Thank you so much, President Mahoney. We really appreciate it. And what President Mahoney said is true. president@sfsu.edu if you have any questions, and I know that President Mahoney takes that very seriously when she receives emails, especially from parents and students. So, all right, we're going to move next to our next section of our agenda, which is housing and residential life. We are going to hear from our Director of Residential Life, who is David Rorick, and I have the amazing ability to get to work alongside. David brings to his work such a dedication to students, their health and safety, and so he's going to provide, unfortunately, Jenny Patino, who's our Executive Director of Housing, Dining, and Conference Services, can't join us this evening. So David is going to do his best to highlight both areas and speak to just the updates around housing and residence life. So David, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Danny. And hello, families and students. I'm so glad to be here today and be able to talk about one of my favorite topics ever, residential life and student housing. And I will try to be twice as dynamic to make up for Jenny Patina, who's taking care of her 4-year-old daughter tonight. Next slide, please. I'm gonna go over about 4 or 5 slides just to provide you all with some basic information about what we're providing to students this year, so that we can then have an intelligent Q&A session afterwards. And I'll kind of watch the chats for other questions and the Q&A that's going on. So next slide, please. So for fall of 2020, we spent, and I have to laugh at this slide because I love how there's a little yellow dot that said details subject to change. I feel like that's my entire life right now. We spent a ton of time this summer working with our chancellor's office and the president's cabinet to put together a proposal to operate housing on campus face-to-face. And I'm actually joining you from University Housing. I actually live here on campus with other faculty and staff, as well as about 350 or 380 students right now that are here on campus. And we put that proposal together to have it be reviewed to make sure that we could operate a safe and yet a dynamic and supportive on-campus housing program. And we did that with a couple of things in mind. So one of the first questions was, who should be living on campus during this time of COVID? And how can we do that safely? So we created 3 priority groups that we believed would serve housing and serve students the best without feeling like it was going to get too big and too overwhelming. We chose those 3 priority groups with a lot of common sense in mind. So the first group was students who were the most vulnerable, folks who had nowhere else to go, that we were their permanent housing. And those tend to be students who were our Guardian Scholar students, international students, as many flights internationally had stopped, and they have been with us ever since COVID presented back in March of 2020. And then we have students who are really struggling with basic needs, folks who, if they weren't living with us, may be homeless. So really that most vulnerable category was our top priority of students living on campus. The next group were students that work on my team, students who were either leaders and employees. And right now we have about 85 of those students living and working in the community to help support the students that live here. And then with students with classes, that's a very small group. Oddly, I thought it was going to be the largest group. And then when we looked at it, I think it's like 14 students who are actually living with us and actually taking on-campus classes. And then finally, we did open up a final group of students who may have had other options to live, but maybe that environment was not conducive to remote learning. Maybe there were a ton of people in the household, or maybe Wi-Fi wasn't as strong for remote learning. So we have welcomed all of those priority groups to live with us on campus. And so if you or your student fit into any one of those priority groups, folks who are taking classes face-to-face, or maybe my home environment may not be the best situation, or if I'm falling into one of those most vulnerable groups of I have nowhere else to live other than university housing, then we're going to be perhaps your best option going into spring of 2021. We also, to make sure that we did things safely, operated safely, we have 1 student per bedroom. So we have a predominance of apartments on campus, which will be the next slide in a second. But we wanted to make sure that we didn't have roommates where people were going to be touching each other and sharing things and spreading germs. And so we put 1 student in each bedroom. And then on this slide, it says we may or may not be able to manage roommate selection. And we have been able to do that on a case-by-case basis, knowing that it's a much smaller group that we're working with. Next slide, please. So we typically, in a normal non-COVID year, would be housing about 4,600 students here on campus. And we were approved to house about 16% of our normal occupancy. And that's about just under 800 students. And we have half of that, about half of it, 380 students living with us currently. And they're living in 3 buildings. All of them are either buildings with full suites, meaning they have a kitchenette or a living room and bedroom. So there's some shared common space, but there's private bedrooms in each of these buildings. And so we have students living at the towers at Centennial Square. That's where we have full suites. We have students in our University Park North high-rise building. That is a full apartment. And then we just opened up a brand new building, Manzanita Square, which is also full apartment buildings. And so those, most of those facilities have utilities included. They do come with a meal plan for those residents who are living in University Park North or the towers. That was recommended as a prerequisite for operating housing so that students didn't have to go out into the city to get food and then perhaps sort of destroy their germ bubbles by ordering in. And then we have strong Wi-Fi, laundry facilities. Obviously, our trash and recycling is continuing to be operated. And then a lot of what my team gets involved in, which is really community engagement and intentional interactions. Our dining center has been open ever since COVID came by. Everything right now is in a grab and go manner. And so students come in. We have an actual app that is being designed and will launch most likely in spring. Right now, we have meal plans that operate, and it's a declining balance, and students come in, they tell the crew what they want, that is then put over onto the side, and then they walk out with that and swipe their meal card as a one visit for one meal. Next slide, please. So my team, once your students move into the housing community, the residential life team really takes ownership of connecting with your students. And the students on the call, you're probably going to meet a student leader, most likely a resident assistant within the first day or first hours of your arrival. And that is one of the most important relationships to your success at the university. We found that pivoting most of what we do in residential life, while we always prefer face-to-face, we are actually able to do much of it still virtually. A couple things that are not, we do have 24-hour desks in all of our communities where we are housing students. So that way, if a student gets locked out or has mail or packages or just needs some support, we always have a 24-hour location where students can connect in with us or go see somebody for assistance. And while my 85 team members are embedded in the community and living with students, both 85 student leaders and then about 10 professional team members, we still have to be mindful of being physically distant and being safe in terms of our individual interactions. And so right now we're mostly available over phone, email, or we're also conducting Zoom office hours. And I know Danny talked a little bit about this at the beginning of the presentation. We are still engaging in lots of academic success, mental health, wellness, and being kind of programming. Right now, our students really want face-to-face programming, and we're working on a proposal to do that, but we don't quite have approval to do that yet. But we're trying to find all ways to engage with our team and your students so that they feel connected while they're here. And that way, even though physical distancing may seem isolated, there's still a community right next door or right around them that they can connect into. Next slide, please. I also couldn't be more proud of this community that we have right now on campus. They have developed a strong sense of prevention and safety. I've heard several students outright tell their neighbors, if you have a party, I'm telling, which is a little shocking, but I'm appreciative of it. So our students are really taking ownership and a shared responsibility in keeping their community safe. And certainly we have shared responsibilities in making sure that we use face coverings, that we're washing our hands, that we have hand sanitizers throughout the community, and that we're really making smart decisions to reduce risk. And so we're right now drafting email correspondence both to residents and to families and homes that may be receiving students right around the fall break and winter break so that you all can plan appropriately to make sure that germ bubbles are safe and consistent, and that people don't inadvertently infect each other when they go back home to see folks for the holidays. And then right now we're talking a lot about what kinds of screening and testing now that that's more available in the San Francisco Bay Area. So those details are still pending. We're working with the San Francisco Department of Public Health to stay in compliance with what they have and what they need from us. And then certainly our facilities team has been front and center here on campus, just making sure that we're extra sanitizing things, that, you know, elevator buttons and surfaced countertops and that kind of stuff, just to make sure that when folks are out in the real world and not online, they're not inadvertently touching something and then getting themselves sick. Okay, I think that might be the slides that I wanted to just cover. Next slide. I think it may be the question slide. Oh, here's how you can get a hold of us, or if you want to explore our website. We have two. Housing.sfsu.edu is probably going to have most of the information that is covered here in this presentation. And then for parents and students, reslife.sfsu.edu will talk a little bit about how we're connecting with students once they're here on campus. And we are fully engaged in social media and online. So we have posts that come out, maybe about 4 or 5 posts every day that come out from our social media. So even if you don't choose to come on campus and live with us, if you want to like us or connect with us, you'll get a good sense of what's going on campus through our social media accounts.
Much for that helpful information about housing and residence life. It's exciting to still see all of the many ways that you're still trying to stay connected to both residents and students during this time, and providing a safe and healthy place for them to live. So we've gotten some questions in the chat. So David, the first question was asked a little bit earlier when President Mahoney was speaking, but the question is about student athletes. Is student athletes, are they allowed to live on campus? And another question was about that and was asking about, is there any chance to have small groups of athletes who maybe are participating together, be able to do those germ bubbles? I love that you called them that, the germ bubbles together. So could you talk about student athletes?
I can, and I also want to just introduce, I have a colleague as a panelist, Conrad Tobias. He's our Interim Associate Director for Student Housing. And Conrad, I'm wondering if you can talk and answer that athletes question, because we do have athletes that do live with us typically.
Yeah, so hello everybody. Thank you, David. As of this moment, we don't have any formal agreement with athletics on housing full teams or certain athletes, but we are open to housing them. So if an athlete does need housing, you know, they do need to fall within one of the priority groups, and athletics isn't currently one of the priority groups, but we can make some kind of agreement with athletics. But as of this moment, I don't think there are any right now. I haven't heard of any plans opening up in a wide case scenario, but that's a conversation that would be good to have. So I plan on following up with that, but as of this moment, that's all the information I have in regards to athletics. We're open to it. We have room, so if there's a need and we can provide, we sure will.
Great. Thank you so much, Conrad, for providing that. I think the takeaway there is, if you're a student, no matter if they're a student athlete or whatever they're involved in, they can apply for housing and they'll be considered for housing in the spring. So David, do you want to also speak to, we had some other questions about spring to fall. So if a student lives with us in the spring semester, will they stay in that same assignment if they're going to return to housing in the fall?
That is an excellent question. We try to minimize the amount of moves that happen in housing, mostly because it destroys the germ bubbles that we're trying to create and keeping everybody safe. And in fact, most of our students that are living in University Park North right now were in their assignments for spring, stayed there for the summer, and then rolled into fall. I do know that at some point we're going to want to get in and make sure that we do some cleaning in some of those spaces, just because I know when students are there for an academic year, I don't know, they may just not be cleaning as well as the university sometimes does. So we're going to want to kind of work around that. But, you know, right now we're still determining what where we're going to operate for fall of 2021. But you know, all I will say at this point in time, without a whole lot of information, is that we really do try to minimize moves. If we can keep people where they are, we will do that, just because it keeps them more safe and secure.
Thank you. And we had another question, speaking of being safe and secure. We had a question about two things. One is around what are the policies or processes for if students are positive for a COVID test? What is our, you can speak to David, our quarantining and isolating, the way that we do that. And then also, is there any discussions around right now requiring a vaccine once one is developed?
Yeah, let me take the exposure or maybe COVID positive part of that first. This was one of the areas that we spent most of our time and attention on this summer, just because we were pretty sure that no matter how safe we are, someone's going to come up positive at some point during the year, and we needed to have a plan to be able to respond to that. The benefit of having students live in a bedroom by themselves is if there is just an exposure, meaning maybe somebody I know is COVID positive, but I have not been, I've not received a COVID positive test result. I can self-isolate in my bedroom and not maybe spread that concern to the rest of the community. And I can still be where I need to be, where all my stuff is, that's going to be most comfortable for my learning. If a student did come with a positive COVID test, we do have an entire building, the Towers and Junior Suites. They are one-bedroom apartments, or they're one-bedroom suites that also have a private bathroom, and we would be asking and requiring students to transfer over to that building for the time of the infectious stage of COVID-19, so it's about 10 to 14 days, and then we would be asking for a COVID negative test before we ask them to rejoin their original assignment wherever they were in UPN, Towers, or Manzanita. So if they were transferred to the Towers Junior Suites for a contagious period of time, we do then deliver all of their meals to them. We do have like a to-go bag so that they don't have to bring everything with them, but they can have a toothbrush and sheets and that kind of stuff that we will then just sort of discard after they're done being in the isolation area or quarantine area. What was the second question, Danny?
And then the second question was about, thank you for that, the vaccine. If a vaccine is developed, and would that be a requirement for getting to live on campus once it is available?
Yeah, I mean, dear God, I think we're all sort of crossing our fingers for the development of a vaccine that comes up, and that may allow us to operate housing in a more normal capacity that we're used to in a more traditional way. You know, we had the ability to even require a flu vaccine this year, and we chose not to. We chose to strongly recommend the flu vaccine, in part because trying to track down documentation for everybody would have been virtually impossible. And some of that documentation is also protected by health legislation and law. So we would need to be really mindful about how can we verify that someone actually is COVID vaccinated. But if we're able to do that, or if it's done at a campus level, then we will be very happy to do that. I think we're just waiting for that vaccine to show up first, and then we'll start mobilizing our guidelines around it.
Thank you, David. We have several questions about when can students apply for spring housing? When will they find out about their spring housing assignment? And then also about fall, when will students be able to apply for fall housing, and when might they find out? So really timelines around applying and finding out.
Conrad, I'm wondering if you can step in on our timelines for both spring and for fall.
Sure, definitely. So spring 2021 housing applications actually begin tomorrow at 9 a.m. You will receive a confirmation for housing about the 3rd week of November, and then an actual room assignment about the 2nd to 3rd week of December. That's for spring 2021 housing. Fall 2021 housing applications usually begin around March 1st. We're not quite sure this year yet, but it will be most likely early March 2021. And assignments usually start rolling in about 2 months later, and room assignments come in about 2 months before the actual move-in date. But they go on daily and weekly as needed after the first batch goes out.
And I will say, for anybody that is going to be joining us for spring, we will likely have a completely contactless move-in process. We did that very successfully this fall, and we had 370 students move in without ever having to touch anything or really kind of interact with a team. I mean, we had team members that were out there, but yeah, it was pretty slow and pretty wonderful. So we'll be operating that way again for the spring.
We only have a couple additional questions, David, and thank you, Conrad, for also answering. And this question is about, will we have enough room for sophomores and first-year students? My response is, it's a challenging one to answer because right now we certainly have very limited amount of housing on campus given the guidelines and the way that we have to do our housing right now, and we don't know yet what that might look like come next even fall. So we're going to continue to keep looking at that. Housing is open to you know, of course, sophomores and above. But we do try to give first-year students as much housing as possible. But David, did I answer that, or do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would say generally that's accurate, Danny. I mean, we usually prioritize our first-year students. This year is obviously showing up very differently. We actually have most of our students are continuing students. In fact, I think we've been pretty intentional about keeping first-year students off the campus. Just, you know, given the way that the housing is being run this year, I would be a little bit concerned about first-year students joining us on campus if they've never been in that experience before, just because it shows up so differently. But for our continuing students, you know, we've got half of what we typically expected to operate right now, and I think Conrad, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're expecting at least another 150 students who we thought were going to join us for fall, but now decided to join us for spring. We have plenty of room. So I'm not concerned that we're going to run out of space this year. We'll just have to kind of play it by ear for fall of 2021 as we see how a vaccine shows up and influences our planning for the next academic year.
Thank you, David. I think there was a good point that was made too in one of the questions about, you know, our first-year students this year are really, most of them, not getting to have this on-campus experience about getting to live on campus. So in a typical year, how many sophomores choose to live on campus? And what's that kind of ratio that looks like from first year to kind of sophomores to I don't know if you know that, just a general idea to give maybe our parents and families a little bit of an idea of typically this is what the number of sophomores who've lived on campus.
I'm not sure if I have that information just embedded in. We usually have a good, and Conrad, I know that you may be playing with these numbers a little bit as well, so feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. We house the majority of the first year class, typically in our central neighborhood, which is the neighborhood that is directly on campus and pretty much contained right around our student support services. I would say maybe about half of those first-year students then come back and join us as sophomores. Most Cal State universities see a little bit of a sophomore slump, and that is definitely the case for us. We see typically about 80% of our sophomores in housing continue on the campus, and only about half of those continue on in housing. And then we get an influx of junior transfers from the community college system. that join us as well for their first time. So there's a little bit of an ebb and flow there. We have prioritized in the last several years freshmen and sophomores, knowing how critical on-campus housing is for them to be able to make a connection to campus and feel settled here. I'll also say it's given COVID-19's impact on the housing market, lots of things are changing here in San Francisco. I'm not sure that we've all caught up with what's happening in the off-campus housing world, but we're definitely keeping an eye on that, and then just kind of getting a sense of how can we leverage, you know, what's happening in the greater market along with what we have in housing stock on campus.
And I want to thank everyone's questions that have really demonstrated and also articulated very well that next year, in many ways, our first year students who've missed out on a lot of the on-campus experiences will be in many ways a first year student. And so that'll be something for us to think about, not only for housing and residence life, but just in general on how, once we can go back to campus, just navigating campus, being on campus, all the things that typically we would orientation wise help students be able to figure out. We'll have to think about that for our sophomores. So thank you everyone for those questions. I think those are the questions that I've been able to manage in the chat that relate to housing and residence life. I don't know if I'm missing.
Can I finish?
Yeah.
May I finish up with one last thing?
Yeah.
I just want to emphasize for those that are still on the call and listening to all of this, you know, a lot of folks want that on-campus housing experience because it feels like it's the right experience to have when you're going to a university, and we want to house you. We really do. In fact, there's a lot of academic data that is showing that if you live in housing, you are quicker to graduate, you have more support, and we want all of those things for you. But I also want to be really clear with those that are on the call today. Housing feels very different this year. And so we have many students that joined us for the fall, and I think the thought was, I just want to see my friends, and I want to be able to live on campus and be able to go into the city. And you know, the city is loosening COVID-19 restrictions ever so slightly, but things still feel very cautious and protective right now. And so, you know, if this is probably not the best business thing to say, but it is probably the best thing from a student support thing to say, is if you don't have to be on campus right now, then join us for fall of 2021. We'll be very excited to see you. But you know, if we are your surest bet for a successful spring semester, then we will be ready and willing to support you while you stay with us.
Right. Thank you, David. I did see one other question that was brought up in the chat as well. And that was around again, back to student athletes, but about student athletes. You know, I think, yes, the answer to the question about student athletes would be considered for spring housing on an individual basis. Yes, if student athletes would like to apply for housing, they certainly can, and they would be considered. But the question is, would there be any ability for an entire team to live together or in close proximity to one another? Makes me think of living learning communities, to have some type of, have we had athletic teams do that before? And would that be something that, you know, could be considered, or if teams were interested in that, could they do that?
I think we would just want to do that in concert with the athletics department. You know, as a student athlete, it's really important that whether you're actually performing this year or competing this year or not, that you still have access to your community of athletes. I mean, that's going to be an element of your student success that's equally important to maintain, and we do understand that. And so if there are a cohort of student athletes that fit into that academic hardship, face-to-face classes, or the most vulnerable categories, and they all want to live together, you know, Lord knows we'll be happy to receive you, just so long as you all are operating the way we need you to be operating, with, you know, wearing masks and making sure that you're, you know, maintaining your germ bubbles while you're here on campus.
Thank you so much, David. And some of the other questions that have come up, I'll generally speak to, and that's about sophomores. You know, we had one of the smallest first year classes this year. Our numbers in terms of our upper class students, it's been pretty consistent with years past, but certainly we took a dip this year in our first year students. You know, some students have chosen to take a gap year. Some have decided to maybe start at a community college closer to where they're at right now, or other things. And so I say that to say, those of you who are concerned about sophomore housing, we will have a smaller first year class that will become sophomores. And so, you know, that's just another thing to think about, is there'll be less sophomores next year than there typically are. So that's just something I wanted to say. And certainly I know that David and Conrad and the teams, as they do housing selections, will certainly think about how this COVID-19 pandemic and the very few first year students who've had the opportunity to live on campus and had to live on campus during such a time. It does feel very different on campus right now. We've had some calls with our students to hear about their experience. And I mean, they were just, if you can get me in an event outside, like far away from a person, I would be there, because of how just hungry they are really for that. But we are keeping everyone safe and well right now in the residence halls. David and Conrad are gonna stay with us for the next Q&A session, but I saw a lot of other questions about some questions outside of housing that I do want to get to in residence life. So we'll transition that. So thank you, David, and thank you, Conrad, and we'll get to some of the other questions in the larger Q&A around housing and residence life. Thank you all. That was, I think, great to hear from President Mahoney, and then to hear from Housing and Residence Life. We are all partners in student success, you all especially, so thank you. Even your questions are really wonderful. They have us thinking about, I'm thinking right now about how do we make sure we're supporting sophomores next year, given this first year and how that is. So please continue to ask those questions. Know that the student's family is truly, you are a huge support for them. It's a promising practice in our field about partnering with parents and knowing that this is a student's university. And so, you know, there's that two sides of, you've got the family support and you've got the student and the university support. And if we can really work in partnership together, it really provides the best challenge and support for our students. And so we're so grateful and thankful for your partnership and your work, especially this year. We're going to transition to our open Q&A section, where we're going to have some additional guests who have joined us to also weigh in. So we have Grace Yu, who is our first year faculty director for our first year experience. Grace, would you like to introduce yourself and just welcome to the forum?
Sure. Thank you, Danny. My name is Grace Yu. I'm a professor in Asian American Studies and also the first year experience faculty director. I've been a faculty member for the last 24 years. And I'm excited and happy to meet all of you today. I really love serving as a first year experience faculty director. And, you know, we are doing all the different ways that we can virtually to engage your child. So if you have any questions about that, I'm here to answer those questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Grace. And yeah, thank for all you do. Certainly the first year experience and new student orientation, all of those things in the past few years have just drastically changed, and they're showing up as making a difference and contributing to our NSE, which is the National Study of Student Engagement. We got our results back from that, and we saw some increases in the first year experience for our students. And so it's very exciting, and I know that the work of Grace and also Chris Trudell, who usually hosts this this time, their work has definitely made a difference. So we're gonna have Grace, we're gonna also have the Gator Mentors who introduced themselves earlier, be with us, David and Conrad. So we have a fair amount of support in answering all of the questions that we have coming in. So I'll start with answering a few that I can, or I think I can, and if others wanna jump in on any of my answers, feel free. One question was about Gator Days activities that are offered. Will those be offered to sophomores as well as first year students? Right now, we're calling Gator Days now the SF Connection. So it is a virtual event that just actually happened last week and yesterday for our admitted students for the spring semester. Most likely we'll be doing a very similar thing in the spring semester, given we'll still be mostly virtual and remote. So those are open though during that time. So if any first or second year, any student really wants to attend any of the SF spring connections, now it'll be just SF connections, I think, in the spring semester, they can. It's all virtual, so they can join that. Our spring sports allowed. I haven't gotten the update on spring athletics yet, but I don't know if others have or not. But that will be a decision that will be made. Most likely that'll be made relatively soon. I know that our spring athletes we're all ready, and we're missing our Gator athletics so much. It brings such a school spirit to our campus. And so I unfortunately haven't gotten an update on if a decision has been made for our campus or not. So we might have to get back to you. We had a question about bursar and registrar to have access to grades and financial information. Is there a portal for us to access this? Yes. Is anyone else on the panel more familiar with those systems, and also could speak to if you're wanting to help your student, a little bit about FERPA and what that would be? Anyone on the call? Even a student, if one of the mentors.
Yeah, I think the students might be great in terms of showing folks how, because you're entering Campus Solutions to access some of that information. What was the question again, Danny?
So the question is about completing paperwork for the bursar and registrar to have access to students' grades information. That makes me think that question, and thank you for asking it, is there is a way for you to, there's some paperwork, but you have to fill out an authorization to have access to your son or daughter's record, your students' records in that way. It's called, that's because of FERPA, the Family Education Rights and Responsibilities Act. And once you have approval for that, though, it does allow you then to sort of get some of that access. But I know that probably one of our student mentors, Gator Mentors, could speak to how do you access that right now? If you needed to go and do paperwork for the bursar registrar, do you log into a system for that?
And Danny, in the chat, I'm putting in the releases for parents if they would like to be released from FERPA or have that consent from their consent to enter their child's records.
Thank you. And then I see Grace, I think maybe you can help us. Thanks.
I know all these services are being offered online, so I can send you a link to the bursars page, and I know that I'm pretty sure they do have drop-in Zoom hours, as do most other programs on campus. But you can also reach them through email if you have more questions. But as far as grades go, there is iLearn and SFSU Student Gateway login that students use. I'm not sure about the specifics regarding the paperwork, but that is what I do now.
Great. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Or did we, I think that answers, that's a very helpful. Thank you, Grace, for that answer. We had another question that came up about as SF San Francisco is lifting restrictions, how does SF State follow those local restrictions, and are we more strict? We have to think about many different levels as we think about our campus reopening. So we are in constant communication with the San Francisco Department of Public Health. They have given some specific guidelines, and they just recently updated them to higher education programs. And so that gives us guidance on what would be approved for our face-to-face classes. I know that was another question, is when will SF go to face-to-face? First of all, we are currently offering some face-to-face. They're very minimal. I'm so impressed by our faculty to take all of the ways that they have taught mostly in person and to pivot them so quickly into a virtual and remote way is incredibly amazing. And I think it speaks to our faculty's innovative way that they're able to do this. They also engaged over the summer, many of them in further learning for themselves so they could make sure that this fall semester they're doing their best to have really good pedagogy that speaks to online and virtual teaching and learning. So
and Danny, can I just say a few words about that? I want to make mention that the faculty, again, as Danny has mentioned this summer, they've done extensive training. And one of the parts that they're really they've been trained in is really to engage students in the classroom and to engage and build community. I know many of you as parents are probably worried about your child and you're wondering if they're making friends online. And I want to just let you know that that's one of the things that faculty have been trained in, is how to encourage these interactions in a remote environment. And so the ways that many have them been, they've been doing it is through breakout rooms. And so you might ask your child, you might say, hey, this week, were you in a breakout room and did you meet someone? And faculty have been really encouraging that in their classrooms, especially our first year classes. There's been a real big push to try to create more interactions and engagement among students with each other.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I know that was a heavy lift, and so I'm so appreciative of our faculty. I wanted to also just further expound on the guidance that we do. We've had a fall planning committee that started really at the beginning of last summer, and then it continued that committee's work into the fall. And now we're the spring planning committee, so we're planning for spring semester. Possibly thinking about the health, safety of campus, what face-to-face classes can be offered, any class that we do want to have offered face-to-face, we have to then submit that to San Francisco Department of Public Health. It then has to, we have to get a decision from them on that. And then our classes have already been approved that will be face-to-face in the spring. Again, there's very few of those. Those are mostly ones like laboratories or other intensive classes that you just can't offer. They're very difficult and challenging to do in a virtual or remote way. And so those few classes will be offered in the spring. We're hoping that we'll have some guidance come spring on I'm sure that committee of spring will become another fall planning committee as we then start really planning for fall semester. And we'll be looking at what's the guidance from San Francisco Department of Public Health, but also the CSU, because we are part of the 23 CSU campuses, as well as the state of California, and looking at what's going on nationally. So it's a lot to weigh and to think about. I think our best guidance right now that we're really following is our San Francisco Department of Public Health, the higher ed programs. Our governor has said, to really, the local context matters a lot. And so we are continuing to evaluate that. So I think that we've answered all the questions that we had in the Q&A, but I did see, I think, there was some continued dialogue about if there's any online access that parents and families can receive to online portals. And I don't know if any of the students know that. Does any of your parents or family have an account or access to any of your information? I'm seeing heads shake no. No.
What I would suggest is definitely trying to have open dialogue with your student if you can. I know little check-ins are really helpful because sometimes I feel like my parents are like really worried about it, but I think a really great thing is to just check in during dinner or something and be like, hey, how are your classes going? Are you struggling? Do you need support? And there's a lot of different ways we support students. So if they are struggling with their grades, we have a lot of great tutoring services.
That's great. I think that's a really good tip for our parents and families about just making sure you're having an open dialogue to do that. I also am happy to, and I saw this in the chat as well, connect if you have a question specifically about that. We can try to connect you to someone in the bursar's office to discuss the access to student records. And we also posted the link to the form. Thank you, Grace, for doing that, to receive access. I think yes. There was a question of the link to submit the consent form is this, and the answer I believe is yes to that. And Grace.
Yeah, and Registrar has a link. If you go to the Registrar site, there is an actual link that says you can submit forms here, or it tells you how to submit forms remotely. So just take a look at that link on the Registrar's site.
Okay, well, thank you. I wanted to actually ask our Gator Mentors, since you all have been so wonderful and you're here, if you had any tips or advice for parents and families for their students as they are beginning to, you know, move into midterms, the stress of just being in the middle of the semester, and it's the first semester for these students. So can you talk to just any advice or tips you'd have for parents and families about how they would support you, but thinking back to when that was your time and this point of the semester?
I am gonna be talking from like personal experience and like the way I work with my family. I think what definitely has helped us and like helped me, especially because there's my other sisters in college also, so we're both in midterm season. Our parents just kind of give us the space that we need to concentrate and like study, and they don't really like bring it up all the time. Like they don't like interrogate us, kind of like, oh, how are your tests going, how your midterm going? Like it's just kind of like casual check-ins, like, oh, how are you doing? Like, okay, fine, like you're doing good, I'll leave you alone. Like just give your student space. I think that definitely helps a lot because it's like a lot of pressure that we're going through right now.
I think something that could be really helpful is suggesting like, oh, have you tried tutoring if they are talking about how they're struggling? But beyond that, I think that being receptive to their boundaries, like Elena was saying, is super important. So I let my parents know. I'm like, oh, you know, please just like leave me be in my room while I'm in class or while I'm doing this. Like, please don't come in. And they're receptive to that and they respect that. So I think, you know, going with stuff like that your student says is really important.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Grace and Elena said. It's kind of a two-way street for me too. My mom doesn't really badger me with questions about finals or midterms. She'll bring it up every once in a while, and we just talk about it, have a good conversation about it, like at dinner or when I'm driving and we're just talking. So yeah, it's not really bad. They just give us space, and we respect that. We give them space. We all have our own lives.
That is so good. Thank you all for sharing that. I think those are some really good tips for really into all of us working remotely and virtually sharing space more now than ever with those that we live with to make sure we're respecting space and boundaries, especially of students during what is a stressful time, especially first midterms and then going into the finals of the semester. So I shared with students this past week on Friday, I sent a letter actually to faculty and staff as well on what are our resources on campus to help students during this time. So, you know, of course we have our CAPS, our counseling and psychological services that's doing tele counseling appointments. We also have resources through our Dean on Call program, and we have our Gator Mentors who are checking in as well. And so I do think there are many ways for your student, if it's not necessarily you could still say things like, oh, you sound like, you know, you're struggling. You should talk to your Gator mentor, or you could, another idea is the Dean on Call program. I heard about that. So if they're not willing to open up to you, they might open up maybe to one of us. So I would hope that we can, either way, we can help each other out. Well, I think that's all of our questions. So we're going to move to the next slide, and we're going to just make sure that you know about the new student help desk. So this is amazing. This is available to you all. You can either do the QR code right now, or you can also go to the new student programs website, and you can access a help desk that is via Zoom, and you just log in during the day. The hours are posted there, and you log in to the Zoom, and there's someone there waiting, and they're waiting for your questions. So they're just sitting there waiting, mostly doing other things probably while they're waiting. I hope they're able to multitask while they do that. But when we do this in the Dean of Students office too. We have open Zoom hours every day. And when those questions come in, when a student joins, or we've also had even some other staff or faculty on campus have joined our open Zoom times just to ask questions. And that's what it's meant to be there for. So please make sure you utilize that if you have any questions at all. So next slide. And that's our Dean on Call slide. So again, this is a great resource for students, whether they're needing help navigating the university, they need maybe advocacy with something. Maybe they're having some issue with a faculty member that they just need a Dean on Call to maybe talk and troubleshoot things for them. Maybe they don't know exactly what office to go to solve an issue or problem, and maybe they ask you about it too, and you might not know. The Dean on Call program is a way to do a referral. So that student would say, hey, I'm having this issue, and then be like, well, we'll help get you. We're going to help do a really warm handoff to that office if we do need to do a referral. So Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, we do appointments. You can email us, you can call. We'll set up appointments as well for Zoom if we need to have Zoom meetings. So the Dean on Call program, I like to think of it. Many of you might get this reference, or students might not. But Ghostbusters, who you're gonna call, Dean on Call is like I like to say. So if your student doesn't know where to go, have them call the Dean of Students office, the Dean on Call program. All right, we'll go to the next slide. Save the date. So our next family forum is going to be Sunday, December 6th. That seems so far away right now, but it'll be here before we know it. We do have fall recess that will happen right before that, which is why it's going to be Sunday, December 6th. So please mark your calendar. As we get closer to that, we will send out information regarding what the topics will be and what we plan to cover. But we're really looking forward to that final fall family forum that will happen on December 6th. And then we'll go to the next slide. So I just want to thank you all so much. Thank our panelists, thank President Mahoney, thank David and Conrad, and thank, of course, our Gator Mentors. Thank just everyone who's attended tonight. We're so grateful and thankful for each of you. If you have any additional questions, please reach out to us at New Student Programs. That's nsp@sfsu.edu, and we'll be happy to get back to you as quick as possible with any of your questions. All right. Well, thank you all so much on this Sunday evening. Have a great start to your week. And as always, go Gators. Bye, you all.